Well, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like we'll have a few folks jump in a few moments, and so they'll miss out on this awesome introduction, but it's all right. So my name is Daisy Muralles, and I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm here with my colleague, Lana Wood, she, they, and we are both faculty members at the university libraries. And today we are going to be talking about the open programs and initiatives at Cal State East Bay, since we are right now in the International Open Access Week, celebrating this and taking the opportunity to talk about these programs. So as mentioned, my name is Daisy Muralles. I'm the Equity and Open Access Open Resources Librarian. A little background, just a little bit. I started last year, July 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. So I've been incredibly thankful for the opportunities to connect with individuals and groups on campus to talk about the Affordable Learning Solutions program. And that's what my role has afforded me. So this time is I'm very thankful for it. But I'm also the library liaison for the Modern Languages and Literatures Department. I teach information literacy courses. I provide reference and research services to students, like the rest of my colleagues at the university libraries, including Lana Wood. And Lana Wood, my co-presenter today, is the scholarly communications librarian, who has been establishing foundational projects and programs around open access and also around student basic needs on our campus. Lana is the liaison librarian for the nursing department and the public health department, formerly health sciences. And so I hope that today in this presentation, we'll be able to show how these open programs and initiatives and what we're talking about today really is interwoven with a lot of the other work that we're doing, whether it's in our teaching, in our support with faculty across departments, and our functional roles, how we fit in this campus. So before we move on, I do want to read our land acknowledgement. Jorge Troje, Cal State University East Bay recognizes that it is located on the ethno-historic territory of the Jalkeen Irgen, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo Ohlone speaking people, the successors of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other familial descendants of the Verona Band. And we recognize that every member of the Hayward community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1957. Consistent with our values of community, inclusion, and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native people. As members of the Hayward community, it is vitally important that we not only recognize the history of the land on which we stand, but also we recognize that the Muwekma Ohlone people are alive and flourishing members of the Hayward and broader Bay Area communities today. So for those of you who are living and working on this land, on this Ohlone territory, we want to highlight the organization Sogorote, which is an urban indigenous women-led land trust that facilitates, the return of indigenous land to indigenous people through voluntary shumi payments by the non-indigenous people. So in the chat, you will see that link dropped. So today, the topics that we'll cover include open education resources, specifically the Affordable Learning Solutions Program, open data and the tools, Dryad and DMPTool, and our open access policy and our open access publishing fund. And the goal really is to help increase your knowledge and understanding along with confidence about these open initiatives and programs so that you can support your faculty, so that you feel more comfortable participating in these programs. Because it does take time, it is labor, and collectively it takes time and labor. So hopefully this will make that effort a lot more cohesive. And collectively, maybe then we can start recognizing how we potentially can create a more intentional, more inclusive culture of open on our campus. And so whether that is converting your course to a zero-cost course or submitting your latest article in an open journal, these things contribute to this culture of open on our campus. So first off, we're going to talk about open educational resources. And just as a refresher of what this means, open educational resources, or OERs, are teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license that permits no-cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution by others with no or limited restrictions. And this is the definition from UNESCO. And UNESCO actually made a recommendation on OER worldwide and focused on 5 areas of action that we collectively worldwide as a global population should be focusing on. And that includes building capacity, developing policy, encouraging inclusive and equitable quality OER, creating sustainability models around OER, and promoting and reinforcing international cooperation. Like we know a lot of things in education, there tends to be a that's the wrong phrasing, an overwhelming display of materials created from the global north, and we ignore our scholarship and knowledge production in the global south. And so this speaks to that as well. So what are we doing here on our campus to support OERs? What does this look like at Cal State East Bay? So as part of the CSU-wide initiative, Cal State East Bay has been participating in the Affordable Learning Solution Program for several years now. It's been since 2014, and we actually, proof of that is the formation of the subcommittee, the Affordable Learning Solutions Subcommittee of CIC. And I believe it got started by the first open resources librarian at Cal State East Bay, Aline Sewells, and then it got moved over to the online campus. It was managed through the Quality Matters program. And so if you go through that certification program, you would be participating in part in trying to convert your courses. And so they also got funding from the Affordable Learning Solutions program. And now it's coming back home to the library, and it's reimagined a little bit. And so along with reporting progress, the impact of this program, the expectation of the Chancellor's office, because this is a CSU-wide initiative, the expectation for me, the coordinator, is I need to work with the campus stakeholders to run this local version of the Affordable Learning Solutions program by developing and supporting communication, doing outreach, like much of this, like this meeting, providing training, professional development, and support services, facilitating OER adoptions by instructors, and to provide equity and access to learning materials, to remove that compounding financial barriers that we, whether we like to admit it or not, are putting directly on our students in the classroom, in our departments, at our campus. So as a reminder, and to me that segues as a reminder of why this work is important. These open initiatives are important to bring attention to I want to re-say that, sorry, excuse me. As a reminder of why these open initiatives are important, I want to bring in this data that we know and we've been looking at quite frequently about the basic needs from the Basic Needs Initiative study of student service and access and basic needs. This was done in 2019. We know that 41.6% of CSU students have reported food insecurity. We know that 20% experience low food security and 21.6% experience very low food security. So we recognize that our students are basic needs insecure. We know that. And so when we're asking our students to buy course material for our classes, when we are asking them to choose, where we're in a way, in some cases, asking them to choose between a basic needs, with buying the tools and resources they need to be successful in class, or a basic need. And when I mean basic need, I'm talking about financial, wellness, food, housing, hygiene, mental health services, and transportation. So coming to class, buying gas, all those things. And this, of course, as we can imagine, affects academic performance, persistence. It generates impacts that affect student debt for a lifetime. Mental and physical health is also affected, of course. And to point this specifically out also, though, this burden disproportionately affects our first-generation college students, our Black and Indigenous students, community college students, people with disabilities, trans and non-binary people, and the formerly incarcerated or systems impacted folks. So former foster students, for example. And the graph on the slide is the one that was taken from this report. And it's just showing how basic needs study, showing how GPA based on basic needs security, race, and ethnicity. And so there is an effect. The other thing that I also want to bring forward is that even when students are able to afford their books, or if they have some money potentially to buy their books, that most students are choosing not to purchase their books. And this, they realize along the way that they can get by without having to put that money into that classroom or into that textbook or into those sources. This is from a student survey that we did in 2016, 2017 to figure out the impact of that course materials made in their learning. And so it's kind of disheartening to realize this, right? We put so much effort to create these courses and create something that, you know, the students we anticipate are going to walk away with learning something new and they have the tools, but the students are choosing, oh, we don't need the tool. We can just get through this class without it. And so when we're developing these courses and we're centering a textbook, for example, to kind of lead the way, we're not giving all of our students that chance when they're making that type of decision. And we know the bigger picture too about this. We couple this with equity gap data. We can recognize that there are indeed opportunities for us to not only look at the classroom environment though, we can also see how to set real goals for departments in determining how they want to bridge this equity gap using affordable learning solutions. And so yes, this is very individual level too, but at the same time, we have to recognize that this is like in multiple spaces happening. Multiple classes are experiencing these things. So a question that I'm putting forward is, what does our colleges, what do our departments need to do to have a zero textbook cost degree program in the next 2 or 3 years? What can what community colleges can our college work with to have these type of zero textbook cost degree programs to ensure a continuous upward stream of Black, Indigenous, Latinx, low-income students to obtain not only their bachelor's, but their master's, and not once will they have to make that decision between a book, pay rent, or even just fund money, right? Like, you know, that's part of the college experience. We're telling students to not even do that. And so what I'm presenting as part of this ALS OER program should only be looked at as a strategy. It is just one piece of the many things that we should be doing to support our students. Because there are multiple strategies, we should be creating various pathways for success for incoming students by actively removing these types of barriers like textbook costs that we ourselves have placed, right? We were doing this because this is how we work and we need to assign a textbook, or we don't, or we need to provide this content. And so we're doing it. But hopefully we can imagine not only removing this textbook cost for our future students, but maybe even recognizing and start thinking like, how can we potentially compensate the students that we forced out, the students that could not continue their classes because we had put so much of this financial burden in front of them. And so as we focus, as I talk about this affordable learning solutions program and the connections to how we want to make changes, not just through like, oh, changing one course, but really like a spirit rather, for lack of words, of this, is to really put forward student basic needs in our conversations to understand the impact that we have on them, to provide support to faculty through faculty development and instruction, and the type of support that is required to do those type of conversions. And then utilize the campus-wide collab resources that we have, you know, tapping into not only academic departments, but maybe we can explore how we can pair up with a student support service to facilitate some of these activities that we're already dreaming of. And so the goals of the Affordable Learning Solutions Program, speaking very broadly, it is a program. It's something that's under development. Like I mentioned, this is something that got transferred back to the library. I'm the new coordinator for this academic year, and I intend to sign up each time that I can to continue pushing this forward. And at some point, hopefully it's sustainable without this outside funding, but you know, this is the money that exists out there. The current goals include just raising awareness and visibility of open, free, affordable, and low-cost resources. The second piece is to create workshops to facilitate the review and potential adoption of OERs to convert courses to zero cost or low cost, because I know in some disciplines, it's really difficult to find quality OERs out there at the moment. And so maybe the next step really is looking into how to create OERs. And then finally, promoting those courses that are zero cost and low cost to provide students with a more financially transparent set of course options, right? So that they know what they're getting, what the options are to complete their degrees. So as a quick question to just kind of put out there, I'm curious to know if, as you know, you have multiple courses probably. So if one of your courses, do you know the costs that it takes one individual student to take your class? Do you know how easy it is for a student to find out how much this course might cost, even if it is zero cost, right? Like, do they know that it's zero cost? That's just something to think about, just a question. And so shifting over to what the program actually ends up offering and how we're approaching our goals is first the outreach and engagement with our campus, having these conversations, just talking about OER, just talking about open, just talking about these resources is one. But I also have students that are trying to figure out how to have this conversation about the resources that we have available through the library resources. So really having a student-centered approach to outreach about library services and resources. They've also been helping with some of the data gathering that I need to do to figure out what departments maybe we can support a little better. And so these are just a list of some of the projects that we've been working on. In addition to that, I also have a graduate student who is working on figuring out, so this internship is new. We have had a long relationship with San Jose State University, and this is just an additional type of internship that we offer now for grad students in the Master's of Science, Information Science degree program. And this is to help, well, what you see here is actually the learning outcomes of this internship. They're helping identify and compare and select outreach opportunities and marketing, selecting outreach deliverables and training materials. We're trying to figure out how to best create tools for specific disciplines. And then hopefully this is all content that we can share with the open community as well. And then finally, the last piece is just the other work of showing students that there are zero cost and low cost courses out there. And much of that work is coming from the subcommittee, which I'm part of as well. And there's representation from across the campus. The first slide that I shared in my in the section included members from each college, members from different departments. And so one of the things that we were able to do last year was finally be able to set up these icons into the general catalog so that students can search in the catalog to find out whether their courses are zero cost or low cost. And this last piece, like I said, it really has been spearheaded by the ALS subcommittee. And it's involved conversations with the bookstore, with the ITS, with the general catalog folks, just to synchronize all this data that happens on a semesterly basis, and just making sure that we're able to do that in a consistent, sustainable manner. And it's been hard. Cross-campus communication is sometimes hard, and that's a-okay. But hopefully, as we develop these conversations and recognize the importance of collecting this information from our instructors, we can be better for our students so that they have this visibility, this more transparent visibility of the financial decisions that they have to make about their classes. And so I guess with what I'll end with for this ALS program section is that as we continue to develop this program, I hope that we're looking at it in a way that isn't just about converting a zero cost a course to be zero cost, that we're also participating in this idea of open within our teaching, something that is more social justice aligned, something that is more participatory, something that brings in students more into the creation of maybe decision-making of some of this curriculum that we're teaching them. And so it's interesting to apply some of these open pedagogy ideas into the classroom through the use of adopting an open textbook, for one example. And what I'm sharing here is just a quote from Dr. Sarah Roslyn Lambert. Success of social justice aligned programs can be measured not by any particular technical feature or format, but instead by the extent to which they enact redistributive justice, recognitive justice, and or representational justice. And I could share that information for folks who want to read more about that. But I hope that with this, I can pass it along to Lana to talk about some of the other open resources that we have. Like I mentioned, this is just one piece of a broader open toolkit or bag of tools that we have available to us to really implement some sort of culture of open on our campus. And so I think maybe we'll skip questions for now and jump to the next piece of our presentation.
Sure, thanks, Daisy. And I just wanted to point out that we have a response to the 2 prompts that you put in chat too, if you want to check that out and engage with it through chat or later on in the Q&A. So thanks everybody for joining us. And I'll go ahead and reintroduce us since we have some folks who hopped on a little bit later. So I'm Lana Wood. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm joined by my coworker, Daisy Muralles, and she uses she, her, ella pronouns, and we're both faculty members in the library. So now we're going to, so we covered open educational resources and the affordable learning solutions, and now we're going to talk about open data and open access. And we're saving a lot of time at the end to be able to answer questions. We imagine that some of you are here because of the communique that came out from the Academic Senate about the open access policies. So we want to make sure that we have time to answer that as well. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So open data. Do you want to go to the next slide? Thank you. So open data generally is data that can be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone, subject only at most to the requirement to attribute it, so cite it, and share alike. And open data has many benefits, which you'll notice similarities to open access. Can you do the next slide, please? So many funders have moved towards requiring that, both public and private funders, that the data that you collect as part of a grant application be made openly available in a data repository. And that's in part because of this shift towards open scholarship and open science that recognizes the value that, that we can get from sharing our data. So some of the values of open data are encouraging and facilitating research. We saw this immensely the last 18 months during the COVID-19 pandemic, as we saw, the speed of scientific discovery just go through the roof because so many places were making their data available to anyone in the world to analyze and find additional findings from. It increases transparency and reproducibility. It reduces data loss. I know lots of, anyone who has had a computer and then has to transition to a new one knows what a pain it is to back up your files and move everything. So having it live in a data repository removes that barrier. And as I mentioned, there's just a general move in the funding world as well as in the open science world towards, publicly funded research or even privately funded research to make the data available. Okay, next slide. So at Cal State East Bay, we have a few tools to support you with open data. We have DMPTool and we have Dryad. So DMPTool is to assist when you're writing your grant applications. We have an institutional license for it. So you'll sign in with your NetID and you're able to preload the template depending on who you're applying for a grant for. So if you're applying for a particular NIH grant, it'll populate the data management plan that's required with your grant application, and you're able to fill that out so that you can submit that with your application and have your protocol. And then another tool that we're really excited about is called Dryad, and Dryad is the institutional leader for data repositories in the world. And so it's a tool that as a researcher, you can upload your data there, to share broadly or to store. And it's also a tool that as a researcher you can go to find to be able to find data sets that people have made available. And as part of Cal State East Bay's institutional partnership with Dryad, our subscription includes the ability to host an unlimited amount of data sets from anyone affiliated with Cal State East Bay. So it's a great place to store and share your data, you know, once you've completed your own analysis with it, to have more life, to be in compliance with submission protocols that require that you have your data available somewhere for, you know, reviewers to look at, or the journal, or so on. So it's a great tool. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to open access now. And similarly to open access, to open data, open access is the free, immediate online availability of research articles, coupled with the rights to use these articles fully in the digital environment. Open access ensures that anyone can access and use these results to turn ideas into industries and breakthroughs into better lives. And there's typically two pathways to open access that we're going to talk about now. So there's what we call the gold route and the green route. And now at Cal State East Bay, we have ways of supporting both of these routes towards open access. So we'll be talking about our Open Access Publishing Fund, which supports paying for the article processing charges to publish in a fully open access journal. And so this provides support for anyone at Cal State East Bay to publish their articles open access, which means that they're open access at the time of publication, you know, to anyone in these open access journals. And then I'll also be talking about our recently adopted open access policy, which allows us to do this green route, which is where you publish exactly where you would have published, but because we have adopted this policy, faculty members by default automatically retain their rights. And what makes it open access is by depositing a copy into our institutional repository or into another repository. Go ahead and click through, Daisy. And so the nice thing about the open access policy is we have that collective coverage now where we don't have to worry about searching for what each journal allows before we deposit it into the repository. Okay, next slide. So similarly to open data, lots of benefits to open access, you know, both to the individual and to the collective. Open access articles have a much higher citations than on average. There's more visibility because people can find your work, you know, beyond the abstract when they're searching for it. And when we talk about equity with research, it becomes available to researchers in the global South who may not have expensive database subscriptions that universities provide in the global North. The public can access your findings, and there's more of a chance if your work has policy implications, there we go, then there's more of a chance that it can be taken up and included in policy decisions. And as we also mentioned, there's just this growing shift for funder and grant compliance that you publish your articles open access. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So Cal State East Bay's open access policy, it was 5 years in the making and involved a lot of, you know, outreach and conversations with different faculty members and other stakeholders on our campus. It's a policy that we are the first in the CSU to adopt this policy, but it's not new to academia. Harvard was the first institution to adopt this in 2008. Followed shortly by UC San Francisco, and then it was expanded to the entire UCs. Since then, you know, this type of policy, this type of green open access policy can be found at institutions around the country of varying sizes, not just those R1s. And so our policy passed unanimously in the Academic Senate last term. And then in order for it to take effect, it had to be signed by the president. So President Sandine signed it in May, and it is effective now. So every faculty member, as defined in the policy as a Unit 3 faculty member as per the CBA, or a faculty member who's covered by the emeriti policy is now covered by this open access policy. And let's go ahead and talk about on the next slide what that means for us. So really, these open access policies are about our relationships with the publishers. And so an open access policy of this kind is a rights retention policy that makes it so that we don't have to have those individual rights retention conversations with our publishers. Instead, we have collective coverage for our scholarly articles for all Cal State East Bay faculty members by flipping the default so that rather than it being a precondition of publication that we sign over our copyright to the publishers, the default has been flipped so that an author from Cal State East Bay, it retains their copyright rather than transferring it for the journal unless the protected author chooses to opt out of the policy on an article by article basis. So that is, a really important part of this policy is that we have this collective rights retention that applies now to any Cal State East Bay faculty member. What makes the work then open access is that the work is then deposited into a repository. Typically it's the author's last touched manuscript. So that's post peer review. Sometimes it's pre-editorial review, sometimes it's post-editorial review. But there's information on our page about identifying the right version. It gets uploaded to a repository, making it open access. And our repository, which I'll talk about more in a couple slides, is crawled by Google Scholar. So that's then how your work becomes discoverable to the world. And just anecdotally, on an article that I co-authored recently, we uploaded it to ScholarWorks, our repository. It was showing up as one of the top results when you're looking at food insecurity in college students on Google Scholar within less than a month of me uploading it to the repository. So it really does bring more eyes to this work, particularly because Google Scholar helps to prioritize works where you can access the full text through Google Scholar. So things that aren't behind a paywall, that a journal might put up are going to be more discoverable and more cited because they're showing up. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Daisy. And I see some questions. I'm going to make it through these slides and then we can talk through your questions, Ivan, after that. So the majority of the information about the open access policy is available on this website, which we'll be sharing in chat. And it includes directions on depositing your scholarly articles, getting a waiver, embargo, or addendum, and robust FAQs as well. And let's go ahead and move on to just showing the institutional repository, and then I'll get to your questions. So since I believe 2007, the CSU have had a shared institutional repository, and then we recently migrated to this much more dynamic and user-friendly interface here. So most of the works in ScholarWorks currently are student theses and dissertations, but we're really hoping that faculty members will deposit their works that are protected by this open access policy to be able to have it shared broadly and be more accessible through Google Scholar. We have documentation in the open access policy page that talks more about how to do that. So before we jump into the Open Access Publishing Fund, let me take a look at the questions that have come in. Okay, so Ivan has two questions. What exactly does it look like? So we actually have a flow diagram now in the FAQs. Let me find that because I think sometimes it's easier to look at this visually. Okay. Daisy, I'll just put it in the chat, and if you could just click on that. And you're welcome to click on it as well, so you can get a little bit more zoomed in there. But So how it works is that for a scholarly article that was which the publication agreement was signed on or after May 19th, 2021, the date at which our policy took effect, you would work through this. So if you publish in an open access journal, you pretty much don't have to do anything as per this policy because the work is already open access through the journal. If you publish in a subscription journal, meaning like just, your regular workflow, not through open access, then that's the point at which you would decide if, you personally want to waive your rights retention for that article and request an opt-out. Or there's also something called an embargo, which is where you set a time frame at which you want this work to be publicly available. So you could say 6 months or so on. There are a few journals that require faculty who are protected by an open access policy to opt out as a precondition of publication, but they're very few and far between. It's, the biggest offender is Nature. So the journal Nature, if you're protected by this type of policy, they require that you opt out of it so that they can have the sole access to your article behind a paywall. But if, let's say you didn't work with a publisher that requires that, so you would sign your agreement with the publisher, no modification necessary, and you also don't need to send them an addendum to have the policy go into effect. We have that option available if you would feel more comfortable sharing that information with your publisher, like, hey, these are my rights. It's a quick and easy form. You just enter in your information, it's automatically sent to you for an addendum to share with your publisher. Otherwise, everything proceeds normally, and then what you would do is upload your copy of the accepted author manuscript to ScholarWorks. And then below is just the workflow of how you would do that to make that piece open access. So, beyond just the benefits of having your work more publicly accessible, we can take a look at what that rights retention means for us, right? So because we've been able to retain our copyright to that article, that means that we're able to do things that, wouldn't necessarily be available to us unless it's in your individual publishing agreement. So that could mean using it as an open educational resource in your class, posting it to your personal website, posting it to academia.edu, ResearchGate, reworking it into a book, other different things that you can do with your work, which you aren't technically legally allowed to if you signed over the copyright to the publisher. So it just provides a lot of possibility for just reuse and sharing of your work that is typically not available in a standard publishing agreement. And hopefully that answered your second question as well. So basically you're protected by this policy. You publish exactly as you normally would publish. It doesn't affect what journals you choose. You can choose to opt out, and that's granted automatically. There's no deliberation process. And then the expectation is that you would upload a version, the author's accepted manuscript, to the repository, making it open access. Okay, so we will have a longer Q&A period after this, but let's go ahead and talk about our publishing fund. So I mentioned, those two pathways to open access. With the policy, where you upload a version to a repository or where you publish in an open access journal. And some open access journals, not all, require an article processing charge as part of that. And this is where open access journals can wrongly get claimed. There are some, but some can get wrongly claimed that they're a predatory publisher, right? Because they're expecting money for you to publish with them. And that's not to say that there aren't bad actors in the open access publishing world, but there are plenty of journals that still have expenses, even if they make their content freely available to readers. So, there's still expenses for your hosting, for the software that you're using. Perhaps you're paying editors, perhaps you're paying peer reviewers, perhaps you have other staff. So there's expenses to running a journal, even if the journal makes their content available for free. So an open access journal is basically flipping the payment system so that rather than charging libraries and individual researchers, honestly through the nose to provide access to their content on the backside, open access publishing flips it so that that money goes into the front end to support the publication so that everyone with an internet connection can access the work once it's published. But we do recognize that there could be a financial barrier for Cal State East Bay authors to choose to publish in these open access journals, right? If you don't have this money from grant funding or from your department. So the University Libraries has launched this pilot that's open now that provides up to 1.5 thousand per Cal State East Bay faculty or staff author, and up to 2,000 if there's a Cal State East Bay student author on the paper as well. That can cover your publication fees associated with publishing in an open access journal. We have funding up to 30,000 for this fiscal year. We're really hoping to expend all of it to be able to support open access publishing. And our goal is to remove the financial barriers that would prevent researchers from choosing publishing in open access journals. Okay, so we're gonna go to our action items now, which is, so today we talked about open educational resources as well as our affordable learning solutions. So we have 2 action items on that front, which is let us know if you have low and zero cost course materials currently going on. I know, Ivan, you mentioned that earlier that you do have some that are zero cost courses. We also, your liaison librarians can help with assisting replacing materials in the course with free or open educational resources. Familiarize yourself more with the open access policy and learn about depositing and do deposit your scholarly articles to ScholarWorks. Okay, so it looks like we've lost a couple people, but I'm happy to answer questions. You're welcome to unmute yourself if you'd rather ask it that way or put them in the chat. And Daisy and I can answer questions now.